Alex Answer here, coming to you on this evening of July 9th, 2016. I want to talk with you briefly about what I see as the greatest threat to the United States. And unfortunately, a lot of people have allowed themselves to become distracted by the fake invasions. The reality is, I give time to certain news headlines I have for years regarding China and their military technology and very specific details. Now, I don't have a long list of notes in front of me. But of course, the main categories at the top of the list is China's rise to the top of the tech industry. And the US tech industry, our computers for a long time being made in China, and many of these computers have actually been installed with a kill switch. Of course, they distract things and direct things to simply Obama, which is another puppet of the New World Order, who's done what? He's helped China. He's had multiple meetings with Vladimir Putin. Of course, we can see the staging of the tensions, the body language, and I think that's what you see when you see Putin showing a confident position and role and demeanor, whereas we see Obama and he looks like a doofus. And I've always seen this as by design. Another version of George W. Bush, and you'll notice if you look back at Bush's earlier period, there were less noticeable fuck ups. And then as time progressed, the guy turned into and the caricatures never ended regarding Bush. Bush the monkey. Yeah, that's what led to all this. Yeah. Brilliant one. Let's just get comical with it and get Daily Show with it. Oh yes, throw in a White House Correspondents' Dinner where we see the mock roast of the presidents. Oh yes, they're really getting one back at Bush and back at Obama. Oh, did you see the and we've all heard it. And so what you're seeing these different glimpses of the theater of war that's building. And as we see these front men for the United States, these incompetent human beings, as it appears to some, greedy. In some cases, they're seen at the center, to be at the center, whether it be Bush or Obama, of the New World Order. And people just lose focus of the bigger picture of the rise of dominance of the Chinese and Russian militaries. We see what's happening on the moon. NASA does research, China takes it, and China expands their space program. China plans to be on Mars before NASA. Meanwhile, we have private companies on the side promising trips to Mars in the years ahead. And these are years that I believe that we're going to see war. Think about what a sophisticated and sick marketing ploy that is. To market going off planet when your world is at siege with bombs dropping. I think one of the greatest threats Americans will face is a human trafficking epidemic. I've talked about this for years. I'll give this a little bit of time and then go on to some other topics. The smartphones that the women are holding, not only are they going to stop working during an EMP or a solar flare, they will still be tracking devices. And we see the TSA scanners, and there's a place where those photographs are going. I've always felt this. And the surveillance grid is being built up with our money and with our sweat, with our blood and with our tears. But it can be used on us by other governments that take control of the technology. A brief reference to the reports that came out years ago about our own robot army is vulnerable to hack and redirection. So a lot of this stuff is getting very, very Hollywood. But when you have a society when the men and women are divided, as I've talked about in multiple videos, and you have a hyped up sex industry and a sexually suppressed society and an economic collapse and certain factors, urban factors, I think people are more of a target than ever. And you have a population for the most part that isn't armed and isn't able to protect itself. And they're living in environments that are going through urban blight. And in some areas, you have problems in the suburbs and the country. And wherever you are, you're going to come across people that are infected by the mass media and by what's on their smartphone and by what's on the internet. A certain amount of the population is acting out on others. as products of their environment and this world. And that's been a part of the agenda. It's not happening to everyone, it's happening to some. So we see shifts, like when marijuana is legalized, what does the cartel do? They go more into heroin. We see shifts where when one part of the business is squeezed or their organized crime institution, there's a default to prostitution. Now, the reason why I put Portland as one of the most risk areas, along with perhaps some others, first of all, you have the history of the kidnapping because of its geographic region and proximity for ships to go in and out. In many cases, men were gone for over 6 years, if they even made it through what they went through. And then you have the current human trafficking epidemic, which is growing. It's nothing like what it's going to be, but you have a culture that has allowed child sex trafficking to flourish. And there could be some other criminal elements. I can't prove it, but there's a history that Portland has with the city being involved in vice. And who's to say that's not still happening? When I look at the Port of Portland and I look at Portland's proximity to the map, and you look at the likely points, and there's also been people that have had their visions and dreams of America's invasion. China coming into the West Coast to cite Leon Legant, who you've seen in some of my recent videos, the man that had a dream of the invasion. What are the patterns to what he saw compared to others? Chinese and Russian forces, and perhaps some others coming with them. I have one friend that firmly believes that North Korea is developing a clone army, and this is not outside the realm of possibility. And it's not outside the realm of possibility that whatever troops could be occupying could be technologically enhanced. Now, there's been a lot of research in the United States into weapons technology and enhancing human performance. And a lot of these transhumanistic concepts have already been outsourced to these foreign nations. For a long time in this last year, I thought that by the middle of this year, it'd be plainly obvious to anyone looking, not attempting to be under a rock, that there are these statements being made, a lot of war rhetoric out of all these nations with multiple hotspots. We have the South China Sea, we have the Black Sea, we have the Baltic Sea, we have NATO's drills in Poland, we have the United States coordinating the drills with South Korea and Japan in response to what North Korea is doing, and that's upsetting China. And so, there are these various hotspots going on. We have stories of skirmishes between jets, between U.S. jets and Russian jets over Syria. We have Russia now in the Middle East, allegedly killing ISIS. Oh, but ISIS was created by U.S. intelligence. Then what's going on the ground? See, in the end, these nations are working together, and they're all benefiting from what's going on in the Middle East. So when we talk about proxy wars, it's not necessarily a proxy war where there's a genuine struggle and they're using all the strategies and all the intelligence to outwit the other nation. On one level, there are people that are playing out that role. On a higher level, it's being coordinated with the world leaders and those that control Putin, those that control Obama. But of course, that's not what's on TV. What controls China, that's not Xi, the current premier. And we've seen these different people come and go. What do you really know about the Chinese leadership? What do I know? Have you noticed this internet firewall? What do you think its real purpose has been to separate the American people and the Russian people language-wise? Or in particular, the Americans and Chinese? What if each of us knew what the other knew about their country's corruption and their potential ties to other world leaders? We would have more of the picture. But for now, we don't have enough of the picture. What we have is black and white headlines that I can regurgitate by memory as I'm doing now. Why do you think Huawei, the Chinese cell phone company, was honored by Rick Perry, the ribbon cutting ceremony? I've cited this many times in Plano, Texas, which is like the Beverly Hills of Dallas. It's a real nice area outside of Dallas where China has placed their Huawei facility. And so you're seeing the Chinese phones pop up. You're seeing stories about the Chinese malware taking out the Android phones, 10 million of them. It's in the news this week. Passwords stolen, hackers from China and Russia and other countries. All this data, all these passwords. Notice how it's all become so common now. There is the false narrative regarding World War III that's out there, and that's that it's going to happen anytime, and that's not what I believe. For years, I've said there's a long-term plan for this since the 2020s. And if you start Googling, doing a little bit of research, type in Chinese Army, North Korea Army, UK, NATO, start typing in numbers like 2020 up to 2025, and you're going to find dozens to potentially hundreds. Army War College documents, War for 2025. I've talked about the solar cycles of war and peace. And I've pinpointed what I believe is where X marks the spot, where we're in the red zone, no pun intended, or maybe the red zone of the post-2020s. And of course, you can see wars pop off when there's a depletion of a certain resource caused by changes in the weather and crop yields. And you can have wars over food, not just water or oil, but certainly soil, the very land that we live on. Oh, there's a bigger agenda behind Agenda 21 and all this public lands and national monuments, including just outside Costilla County, the expanded Rio Grande National Area, the National Monument. In my sense and feeling, it's all leverage on the national debt. More headlines are popping up. Is the U.S. going to annul on its debt to China? Basically not pay it back. And what will the consequences be? These are normal conversations that are now being had. And what are you hearing from Alex Jones and Gerald Celente and others in the alternative media? Jeff Rense. Are they discussing the same thing, or is Putin their daddy? Is Putin your daddy? I also started discussing Russia Today back in 2009, 2010, how it was co-opting the conspiracy research community and the audience, people looking for answers in the United States. Betrayed by their own media, they turn to a foreign one. And we've seen Russia Today, even in recent years, show an anti-gun stance, show a pro-New World Order stance, as long as it's coming out of Russia. But they've been doing that for years. It's Putin's network. And Putin is not outside this system. Why do you think he's meeting with Netanyahu? Russia's going to build Israel's oil fields. And who is going to build Israel their own island on the water? That would be China. And you can find my archive reports. It's all real news in the news section tab of amtvmedia.com. And of course, you know this. You know about Clinton and the missile technology transfers to China, because you're an educated person. You know, of course, about Boeing and their connection with China. I actually had a friend that used to work for Boeing. He would talk about the Chinese that would show up and look over their shoulder, receive blueprints. So, at one point, this was like a core conversation regarding corruption in our country several presidencies ago. And now it's all normalized. And people have said for years, well, China's already invaded with their economy and their Walmart. Americans really have no idea, for the most part, anything about karma or do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And basically, in general, how we've been set up for a fall. The nails on the coffin being the response after 9/11. And I would learn from history, because if you think Americans are going to get a free pass, when there's occupying troops and, that shit's happening to people, you think they're going to care? I think that there's going to be a lot of revenge taken out on Americans, just in the same way that the American military and NATO forces have killed innocent civilians, and with the majority of the members of their nation not caring. Why? Because those people were all generalized as terrorists. We can look at Afghanistan, we can look at Iraq, we can look at Palestine, we can look at Libya, we can even look at Somalia and parts of Africa. And by the way, that's where you should watch China's advance, because they're advancing and they're moving now. Territory by territory. Oh, they're needed. They're UN peacekeepers because, oh, the African countries can't get their shit together. Of course not. So China gets a little exercise. And we could see them in my recent video intro in the South Sudan and other places. This is just the exercise in combat training that they're going to need for something larger. So you put in one battalion and then you don't wear them out on multiple tours. You get them out and you take care of their health, because the agenda is to build up the health, the strength of these militaries and the men. Meanwhile, you see what's happening to the U.S. soldier. And what do? They talk about a draft potentially for women and transgender allowed in the military. They're throwing a lot of things off balance, and that's the truth. And they are not molding the U.S. military into one that's going to survive the coming conflict. You look to these other nations and you look at their social engineering program. It's similar in that it's preparing for war, but it's slightly different. They're actually preparing their people for a successful conflict in a scenario, stage managed war, where the U.S. is not positioned to be the winner. There's going to be a lot of tensions, a lot of struggle for the off-gridders of tomorrow, especially in certain areas where there's displacement because they're in a captured territory. Strategic relocation regarding off-grid and preparing for this is a very deep subject. Joel Skousen has part of the picture, but he doesn't have it all. The rest of the puzzles, and we're going to pause our podcast tonight because I've said the meat of it. You're going to have to figure out where you're being called to. It's also not a time to be accruing negative karma. A lot of these people that are accruing negative karma, that are programmed to be cutthroat by the society, I suspect are going to be targets and could fall upon some. I don't wish that on them. I think that this is how this goes. So in the years you have left and I have left, while we have this technology before the internet and YouTube goes where I suspect it could, use this time wisely and research this nation and this world and clean up your own backyard. You got to stop being a slave. You also got to stop dominating others if you're one or other of the polarity, because you have to free yourself. You have to free yourself from a lot before the body follows. And it's a process. Have you accrued some negative karma? Are you one of those that's actually looking over your shoulder? Because I've met those and have friends with people like that, like my old friend in Portland. Part of him is real scared. In his 60s, used to be a very dangerous man, one of the most dangerous men I ever knew. Taught me how to hit hard and a few other things. Then I picked up the rest of the things for myself with my interest in the martial arts. He lives in fear because of the things that he did to others. There are many men that have PTSD from things they've done to others. For example, in the military, there's ways to reverse this. And there's ways to deal with one's demons. And it's by doing good deeds, not just educating yourself about what's going on. but putting you in a position, yourself in a position to right what was wrong. Those are the words that I want to leave you with, because there's specific reasons why I travel a station without a gun, without fear, even though for years people thought that the type of things that I was talking about would lead me to some kind of disaster. What will be, will be. At some point, you got to put yourself out of it, take yourself out of it, and take a look at the bigger picture. Why are you here? Why do you have this information? Can you do with the time that you have left? Not just in the next couple of years, but on this planet, because we can be in a position to help others during a collapse. And synchronicity can lead us to the right people and vice versa. Let us not let the negativity that we've experienced dealing with the ongoing social zombie apocalypse not allow us to connect with the right people when we need to. Because I'll tell you what, I've seen the universe bring me and other people together in the most synchronistic ways to where I now have complete faith in everything working out as it needs to, as it should. And so if you walk into this with spiritual armor, you can go deeper down the rabbit hole and educating yourself as to what's going on and finding the answers for yourself. Alex Ansary here, signing off from somewhere out there in Southern Colorado.